I am delighted to be once again joined by Shaun Pinner. It is a tremendous privilege, always, but also massively enjoyable, I have to say. Shaun has the voice of authenticity, the lived experience of having been fought for his home, fought for his adopted country, Ukraine, fought for his city, Mariupol, which unfortunately was lost to the Russians. And he has the terrible experience of being in captivity and tortured both physically and psychologically by Russians. He is now, I dare I say, a thorn in their side with his YouTube channel, his book, his Substack, and actually his incredible reach. And what Shaun has is something which few in our ecosystem do, which is a strong Ukrainian following as well, because the information, the insight he provides are not just vital for a Western audience, they're absolutely essential for Ukrainians as well. And that's a tough nut to crack, Shaun. Let's start with that, because getting
Yeah,
Ukrainians to listen to information which is novel and interesting and useful, that's quite an achievement.
I'd like to say I planned it, but I don't think that I'd be lying. I think I've totally sort of fallen into this. I certainly needed time to rehabilitate after the exchange. I think I learned a lot from writing the book and confidence there in writing that and about my story about captivity. And I think most of it progressed from there, really. I knew I couldn't go back to the fight. Not that I promised my family I wouldn't because of the pain and the anguish I put them through before. And not to mention, I wear glasses now. I lost sight, partially sighted in my shooting eye. I'm 52 years old, but I still wanted to give and fight for our home. And as I said to you before, we hit record. What job could I do? Once I'd been a former Ukrainian Marine, prisoner of war. What could I can really take to a company? And if a company asked me, what can you bring to the company? What I'm going to say, I did resistance training. I was captured and I could shoot a gnat's ass at 300 meters. It seemed a logical move to move into journalism and write about what I know about and what's happened in my life over the last what's turning into 10 years now, how quick that's gone, from my time when I first arrived in Ukraine. So friends along the way have helped me. Calhoun, a journalist, has been there and said, I told him what I was thinking about doing and he's advised and helped me. And Chris Sampson in Kiev is a different sort of journalist who has helped me too. And he's everything I'm not. So I took some advice and I essentially just started getting on with it. It was Jake Bro who just said, just turn your camera on and get on with it. Stop talking about it, and start
Yes.
doing some
Oh,
YouTubes.
I wish you'd
And
told me
I
that
did.
first of all. I missed 6 weeks in '92 at the start of the war because I listened to the wrong people. I listened to video professionals like you've got to have this microphone, you've got to have that, you've got to
Yeah,
professionally edit it, you've got to sequence the sound. I'm
no,
like, I just know that
yeah,
was all quite frankly bollocks, and I lost 6 weeks of momentum.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was. I'd sit there thinking most of the time I put the doubt in my own head and sort of, how can I make this work? Asked a few people, and then realised that there was a media rule at the border. With what the West found important and what Ukrainians found important. As I said to you before, when Ukrainians around here, 2 hours from the front line, who are getting bombed every day, when they read about Putin's economically weak and he's going to collapse any moment, most of the Ukrainians here just laugh and say we've heard that for 3 or 4 years. It's not really important. This is something that just gets regurgitated for clicks. So I started to write about Mariupol and about my time there, what I saw there, which then resonated with a lot of Ukrainians who thanked me for identifying what essentially is a lot of pro-Ukrainians whose first language is Russian, and then they're not native Russians, they're Ukrainians, and they've been excluded from all because of all this Russian propaganda, including my wife, who's a first language Russian speaker but identifies as Ukrainian, and then. I started to do a little history research and understand from people, Russification and my wife's going, you're not an expert on Ukraine, and I'm like, yeah, but I know more than most because I live in that region. So I just it sort of progressed from there. And when I started talking about sujik, the mixture of Russian and Ukrainian you learn when you go to those regions, and my time in captivity, it's sort of all gelled. And then we set up YouTube, Substack, and that developed really quickly. And and the book helped immensely with putting Ukraine on the map. So that's sort of where I sit now, on top of taking Russia to court in my spare time.
You're a real thorn in the side, as I say. So you'll be on a list. Well, you're on a list from captivity anyway, and of course they try
Mm.
to use you for PR. But you'll be on. Well, you'll be increasing, let's say, your status on the naughty list. I think quite significantly with your activities that you're
They're
doing.
going to give me the death penalty again. I mean,
Yeah,
what
well,
can you
that's
do? I
right.
mean, I'm
Double
already
death
with
penalty.
sanctions. They've already stole my house, so what are you going to do? Give me the death
Yeah.
penalty again? I mean, it's
Yeah.
like, what can you do?
Khartia is a Ukrainian corps operating around Kupiansk, which is a critical area of the front. Now, this campaign won't be for everybody. It is a kinetic campaign in that we are crowdsourcing here for funds to buy vampire drones. 15, in fact. 5 of those have already been achieved in this campaign, but we are looking to scale this up to get the full amount of $40,000 US. That's going to Jigger's Paw that are handling this. This is an incredibly important campaign. There are many creators who are taking part in this. My view is that it's not enough at this point just to help Ukraine to survive. It's not enough just to invest in humanitarian causes. Not everyone's going to be comfortable with this, but they have to remove the invaders from their lands. To do that, they need the skills, the munitions, the weaponry to achieve that. This is where these vampire drones come in. So please, this isn't a full polished promo. I'm still working on that, but the campaign launches today. Please do check it out and, of course, help in any way that you can.
Yeah, oh, exactly. But the other bit, of course, is what we've both been trying to do is to increase the so-called bubble. And when there are things like the Kursk incursion or Operation Spiderweb, you see the bubble reinflating, as it were. People who were pro-Ukrainian, but have stopped watching it every day. And I noticed really this since autumn 22. I think probably the pro-Ukraine community reached the maximum extent very, very early in the war. And the real effort has been to keep it inflated, keep people engaged. And of course, what you and I are doing also is kind of raise funds for Ukrainian army. And I should do the plug right here. We really need to get our fundraiser over the line because we are partnering with Jigger's Paw, who are partnering with Khartia Battalion to get 5 vampire drones, which are essential pieces of kit. So without any further ado, please check out the link in the description for that fundraiser. We're about halfway. We need to get that over the line. And I can say this maybe for the first time on the channel, I will be visiting as a guest of Khartia in June in Kharkiv for an extended visit. That'll be the first time I've not just passed through Kharkiv. So that's going to be interesting. But please do donate and help to make that happen. But we're doing a lot of stuff there. But this is a question of not just keeping the bubble inflated, which Jake and others are doing, with such tremendous effect. But I think you and I are also thinking about how can we increase the bubble? How can we get different people engaged with it, different demographics? Because the average age of my audience is 65 plus. They're from all over the world, US and so on. But it's people who are brought up on newspapers.
Mm.
The younger generation are all, and I don't want to malign it because there's a lot of evil in the world, and what's happened in the Middle East is terrible. And Netanyahu, to my mind, is a populist in the vein of Orban and others. He's not a nice dude, but they're all Gaza, 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 Gaza. Whereas from my point of view, strategically, historically, what's happening in Ukraine is far more significant. But how we engage them, how we bring them in to these important messages is a challenge.
It is. One of the things I was trying to overcome was the fact that you can't get Ukrainian personalities on American news. I mean, I couldn't even get myself on a lot of it. And I was talking to people like Adam Kingsley, who would, the former Republican congressman, and Denver Riggleman, to try and get me on CNN and places like that. That was not a problem. Almost got on Fox before they cancelled on me. I can't even get on it. I'm a British speaker. It's like talking about Ukraine. They just don't want those sorts of people on. So then I started to plan trips and tours to Canada and America and try and get, into the media there. I actually cancelled my trip to America because at the time I was arranging it, one, Russia was playing havoc with Interpol, and I wasn't sure if I got stopped. I wasn't expecting America to send me to Russia to fulfill my sentence and get executed. I'm not saying that, but if I got stopped at the border there by ICE or Homeland Security, they could make my life hell if I've got a red notice, and I won't know until somebody acts on that, until I get to somewhere like America, who then will send me back to probably the UK, where I might have struggled to get back into Europe. So, and at that point, Trump was on about invading Canada and Greenland and NATO, and I just went, I'm not even going to risk it. I'm not even going to risk going to America at the moment because, one, I'm going through a court case, and if I can't, go back to Ukraine, that's going to cause me some real problems. So I went to Canada and met the diaspora there, the Ukrainian. It's massive, huge, where I was able to get on, news channels out there and talk about what's going on the ground here, with the hope of getting those people who are probably sitting on the fence who don't really understand what's happening on the ground out here. And it was Adam Kinzinger who put the words, sort of the idea into my head, saying, when I did a podcast for him, he was saying, you're probably the first Ukrainian soldier most Americans would have met, which gave me the idea that I should go on tour and go to some of these countries and talk about what's actually happening on the ground, the ethnic cleansing. Why nobody ever says the word genocide now? We're not allowed to say that anywhere without, it's just not mentioned
It's
anywhere.
mind-boggling because
it's bizarre.
It ticks so many of the boxes from Butcher, Pin, and so on, to the very clear intent to eradicate Russian-speaking Ukrainians who normally they came to save, to eradicating Ukrainian language and literature. I mean, it's grotesque, really.
It is.
The weakness of using technicalities, that it doesn't meet all criteria. I'm sorry, it meets more criteria than actually other things that are labeled genocides.
Yeah, I mean, I just put a piece out today on my Substack about saving the Russian speakers and how Mariupol is a testament to that lie. It was predominantly a Russian-speaking town. You look at all the regions Putin has decimated; they're all Russian-speaking, predominantly. He's created 6 million forced internally displaced refugees. I'm one of them. My wife's one of them. Lost 2 houses now to Russian invasions, Crimea and Mariupol. So all these families are split. They're predominantly Russian speakers. Yet he came and said he's saving the Russian speakers, but just totally wiped out the cities and the towns and pretty much killed anybody that was in that area. Really disintegrating the towns and actually building new foundations with Russians they're bringing in. That is ethnic cleansing. I saw it in Bosnia. I'm seeing it again here. It's a repeat. And you're talking someone like Putin, who's created one of the biggest land wars in Europe, yet Trump still gets the press, even though he's killed 25,000 people, conservative estimate, of predominantly Russian-speaking Ukrainians in just Mariupol. 6 million refugees.
And that's likely to be a very conservative estimate, but we may never know the full extent. Including the theatre, which of course was bombed. And I did an interview of a journalist recently who's done a whole book on that, interviewing survivors of it, and it's the horrors of it that people refuse to engage with, and then refuse to call things by their actual names. Ultimately, though, it seems to me that neutrality, or the supposed neutrality, is actually one of the greatest weapons of Russian imperialism and its imperial design. If you feign neutrality in the face of this evil, and it's been said before, it's not original, you're actually enabling, encouraging, appeasing that evil. The only way is to fight. And it seems to me that that's what you've done. That's what Ukrainians know they have to do. It's fight or die, quite literally. And you took that cue from your book as well. Do you get the impression that really that lesson is learned outside of Ukraine? Because I'm afraid to say that outside the Baltics, maybe some of the Nordics to an extent. I really don't think that is understood. The sort of zero-sum game, fight or be erased. That's what faces all of us in the face of Russian imperialism.
I think certainly the countries bordering Russia understand it more than those secondary countries. America doesn't really get it at all. Not in the slightest, and it's bound by let's use J.D. Vance's quote this week, where he said, "Nobody's done more for Ukraine than Trump. I nearly choked on my tea." This is a guy who stopped military arms, before he was even inaugurated. This is a guy who stopped military aid, humanitarian aid, stopped projects, got people their jobs, as soon as he was inaugurated, stopped all the humanitarian aid. My wife lost her job, all the projects around that, demining, that's just one sector. So, in respects to, Trump being the hero of Ukraine, we've now got sanctions lifted on Russian oil, which Britain's just copied it. Loopholes in the law allowing us to buy Russian oil through third parties. This is bizarre that the people are actually saying that the last 2 days that this sort of, soundbite, when essentially they're lifting sanctions on the very people that have invaded Ukraine, which is, I find, it gets me up in the morning.
Yeah.
It gets my hackles up. It gets me writing juices going. And I just have to sit there and then write about J.D. Vance and try and keep a journalistic view without using the words like knobhead and
absolute like dickhead and criminal.
Because otherwise you've lost the fight, and people in America won't read it when you start calling it that. So you've got to keep
You have to find ways, don't you? If you say like, Vance is wrong, but then you have to find a story to tell. For instance, I know someone I know, Richard Woodruff pops up and said that, just in the last year, he's manufactured more drones, cumulative, that have had more effect than all of those javelins provided by President Trump. I know a group, they're called Klin drones, run by my friend Ksenia Kalmus. She has a team of teenage girls, right, in a basement somewhere in Kiev. They produce more drones in a month and produce more kinetic effects on the battlefield than all of Trump's javelins combined. So we have to, there's a bunch of 18-year-olds sitting there soldering away. It's truly mind-blowing.
That's how Russian propaganda works. And now Trump's doing exactly the same thing. For all those millions of sound bites that everyone proves wrong, it takes time and effort and energy to write paragraphs and essays about something like J.D. Vance saying, "Yep, nobody's done more for Ukraine than Trump," and you go down line by line and you're writing that, and that takes time. So they just pump out all these sound bites that are not true now, and now you've got the Trump administration who are just mimicking Putin's style of running the country with the same sound bites, even down to Laura Loomer, Margarita Simeon. He's got his deputy
got their equivalent,
in Vance.
Haven't they?
They've got their equivalents in Russia where it's identical, where you could just ping these people. It's mirror image of Putin, and the soft stance is what's leading to Putin continuing his war. So it is the lifting of sanctions. So Putin says, "Well, I'll carry on then." He's just got a cash injection. There's no emphasis. There's no will of governments to even condemn the escalatory bombing that's going on civilians in Ukraine at the moment. Where's the UN? Where's Antonio Guterres? Where is anybody? Yet he's hitting trains and coaches and tram stations in Dnipro and killing vast amount, attacking solely civilians. Yet nobody's saying a word. It's bizarre.
UN convoy was attacked. UN convoy was attacked, and they won't name the aggressor.
They won't name the aggressor.
We don't know who did it, but both sides should kind of calm down and pull back. Well, excuse me. There's only one side bombing UN vehicles and convoys and facilities, and they're
bizarre.
On the UN Security Council. So I think that tells us everything we need to know.
Yeah. So I mean that is just how Russian propaganda works, and we spend my whole journalistic career now, I'm not sure I could do anything else apart from Ukraine, but certainly fight in those narratives. And that's where I think, especially on Substack, that's gone really, the long form reads have gone super quick. In a couple of months, gone to nearly over 2,000 subscribers. Which for long reads talking about Ukraine, it put me. I nearly had a heart attack when it came up on my Substack. It said, "You're now in the top 20 of world politics," and then there was Anne Applebaum, the former Australian Prime Minister, and I was thinking, have they got this wrong?
Surely
is this
it's
a mistake?
Yeah,
this is surely some sort of mistake that I'm in the top 20. And then I saw Michael Rice repost my tweets, and even John Cleese has been an avid repost my stuff. So
surreal,
yeah,
isn't it?
It is surreal when I sit in a room 90% of the day and 2 hours from the front line, for a best part of the day, just writing on my own. And it really is good to see that people are actually reading it and resharing it, because that's as good as a donation, especially now. If you can't afford to donate, retweet and share Ukrainian writers, what's happening, people on the ground, stories from the ground, and that's as good as a donation for anybody watching.
And this is an interesting thing, because we had a fantastic conversation just before we hit record, thinking like, oh, we should have had the camera on with some of that stuff. But you and I have both detected just in the last fortnight a sort of curious change. And that change seems to be that there are a bunch of organizations in Ukraine who've been doing fantastic work, has to be said, over these 4 years. But suddenly they've kind of noticed what we're doing. But suddenly there's some kind of change in strategic direction. Now, where that's come from, I rather suspect it's come from the top. Probably been influenced by key figures like Maria Bolinska and others who've been talking about this now for a while. But basically, they're shifting. They're saying, okay, the kinetic thing is now under control. The Russian horde is being contained and in some respects pushed back on the battlefield. And we are already detecting that Russia is now shifting to, as you say, whitewashing its reputation internationally. We've got the Venice Biennale, they've just been reintroduced back into the Olympics in the Gymnastics Association. Just grotesque, absolutely grotesque. But here they are. Kalen Robertson is saying, he's been traveling around Europe and suddenly there are kind of Russians everywhere, or maybe they always were, but now their voices are being heard. I mean, this is grotesque while they're committing crimes. So it seems that we're now shifting, and they're shifting their resources into what could be called cognitive warfare. I mean, some people like that topic. Some people don't think it's the right way to describe it, but I think broadly speaking, we're talking about cognitive warfare, and information operations form a subset of that. There does seem to be a consciousness in the Ukrainian government that this is the next front, that Russia is going to be trying to launder its reputation externally, get sanctions removed, but also it's going to be trying to weaken our political systems, which it is, not just through Brexit, but through a whole range of different means. They're also going to turn their attention to trying to destabilize Ukraine internally through internal politics. And actually, we've seen some extensive campaigns over the last couple of weeks. There are a few key people like that absolute, excuse my language, piece of shit, Yulia Mendel, who appeared on Tucker Carlson. There's one you mentioned earlier as well, the sort of,
Marta.
Marta, who does she does Holocaust studies and whatever, but for her, all Ukrainians are Nazis, kind of basically is what it boils down to. It's a pure laundered narrative. So do you think the next front, or the unfolding front line, is now as much cognitive as it is kinetic?
Yes, to put it bluntly. I'm going to keep my composure here. I wrote about a power shift that was happening about around February of this year, January, February of this year. I said there's a distinct power shift with what's happening with innovation in Ukraine, the inbuilt rocket systems, the way that we were managing the Russians and controlling the Russians on the front lines. What subsequently has happened? I think the West is generally public about 3 months behind what's happening here. What I've found out is that 3 months later, you've got The Economist now writing about the very things many people were writing about that live here, 2 or 3 months earlier, and justifying that what we were saying was correct. There is a power shift. I wouldn't say Ukraine is winning. Certainly, if you speak to people in front, as I alluded to, I won't tell you there's any change. There's no situation, no change. So, but what Ukraine has done is pull it back to a level playing field as such. They've, there's no definitive side that's better off at the moment. I wouldn't call it stagnated, but they've certainly leveled the playing field. You only have to see how Victory Day, was managed by Ukraine and not Russia this time. And how you see
when they gave
the attacks on
permission to
Moscow,
hold the little
they gave
parade.
permission. The narrative stated that's given everybody. That's as symbolism goes. That's right up there at the top. Ukrainians want to see, Russians in Moscow feeling what we've felt for 4 years. So as symbolism goes, that was the top. That's the very top. This has only just happened. We've got to a point where after into our 4th year, Russia is starting to feel the pinch of this war. I keep telling people, but we've got no will to sort this politically. So where's this going to go? Personally, don't see this actually being resolved on the battlefield anymore. It's going to go politically. It's going to go into the propaganda. It's going to be economically. That's where, to use somebody else's phrase, we're now in a boxing match with limitless rounds, but it's going to go the distance. Somebody's going to fail at some point. And that's where I think realistically we sit. It's the propaganda side of it, as you said. Those people are attacking me. Julia Mendel, I had run-ins with her before she went to Tucker Carlson, with her telling me how Dnipro was. She doesn't even live in the country, for starters. So I was already arguing, I said, what you writing? I don't understand. Your account says you're pro-Ukrainian. And then she was on Tucker Carlson 2 or 3 days later, and I was putting my posts up to her maybe a week or two before saying, I don't understand what you're saying. You're writing about Dnipro, saying it's chaotic, it's struggling. This is not a city that's under any stress at the moment. And then she referred it as to being Kharkiv. We don't even get cab bombs here. We're not Pokrovsk. We are a big city that gets bombed occasionally. And for 2 weeks before she wrote that, we didn't have a single drone or missile hit the city. So, this is really, to your listeners, you've really got to be careful. Even when they have a Ukrainian flag or a Ukrainian Vyshyvanka, you've got to then check again to see through their history of what they're actually posted. And many of these accounts that are I would say undermining the government. You could criticize the government. I've never had a problem with anybody criticizing Zelensky, but these accounts solely geared to undermine Ukraine as a country, undermine the government with unsubstantiated allegations. I'm a big critic of one of the biggest things they use is they're always Zelensky's excluded. They run away because they can't speak honestly in Ukraine. God, I write about mobilization. I write about the corruption. I've served the country. I'm still here. I'm not arrested. I don't get arrested for speaking Russian. These guys are out there pumping this stuff out every day saying, well, Russian is banned. No, it really isn't banned here because pretty much I speak it and the people I speak with speak it. And it's not banned.
I spoke
here.
it in Kiev. Not everyone wants to, but I spoke with cab drivers, in Kiev and all over. Because if you don't have a common language, you're like, okay, well, we have to communicate somehow, and I'm interested in why you're here and what's going on. And I had the weirdest experience. I even had a ethnic Russian cab driver. That was a weird conversation. A guy from Kerch. I'm like, I didn't expect to meet a Russian, and it was like. That was
no, I do ask. Out of courtesy, I say, look, I speak a bit of Suzuki, I speak a bit of Russian. Can I speak a bit of Russian? And generally, people say, yeah, it's not a problem because I'm British. But I hear other people, Ukrainians even ask that. Russian-speaking Ukrainians say, do you mind if we speak Russian? And Ukrainians like, no, we've got no problems with talking. So, I'm in that environment, firstly. So when you see someone like Yulia Mendel go on Tucker Carlson, a predominantly Russian, platform, a Russian-loving platform, a guy who's never actually been to Ukraine himself, you know exactly what she's going on for, broadcasting to many Americans that, suddenly we're all Nazis. And then they interlink these guys. So you've got Marta then reposting the Tucker Carlson interview with Julia Mendel. Again, I wake up in the morning with my hackles up and start to type and write again. And the thing that gets you up every day is what they're doing. And which is why I think Joe Lindsley, Joe Lindsley, he's going back to America to try and talk to various people and media outlets out there about what's going on here, because frankly, the Russian propaganda war is getting bigger, and it's targeting places like America. With those false allegations, it's more important now to talk about the realities over the last 10 years that I've been here, from pictures and interviews we do with people than ever before. I mean, it's more important now, especially now that, as you say, it's slipping. The narratives are slipping for Putin. He's trying to reduce the size of his audience to his failures by stopping WhatsApp and Telegram, and those social media apps, and trying to get everybody onto a government app, Max, so he can spot those people that are talking sedition and criticizing the government. So when you're living here, it's easier to see that. When you're just going about in the UK and you're going to work every day, and you might pick up a podcast, you get you get a certain window where you've got to put all this in. And I think the essays have gone with a readable story about what I'm saying, longer than, let's say, just a news headline. It's just that little bit longer with a bit more substance, where I don't build 1,500, 2,000 words. It's an 800-word essay with a little bit more detail, which I think people have taken on quite well, which is something I'm sort of pushing more on. But yes, certainly, I get a lot of feedback now with people sort of saying, I just didn't know that. I didn't know that, because even now the Nazi and Shaun Pinner, the mercenary, is one I've been fighting for years. Lazy journalism. They don't understand what a mercenary is. I wasn't a mercenary. I never left the country I had legal status in. My wife and family in Ukraine. I paid my taxes here. I had residency here. Yet the Russian narrative was always that I was a mercenary. That stuck, and 4 years later, I'm still fighting those in Western media. Less now than I was when I first was exchanged, but it's amazing when I write to Ipso and say, and threaten people with Ipso in the UK, which is the media regulator, say, this is happening. Can you speak there? Remember, can you have a word with them? This is incorrect. And then I'm able to get things done for modern day or present day captives like Hayden, who's a British guy who's been captured by the Russians. So I'm able to sort of safeguard their look after them while they're in captivity in that regards, with more of a journalistic view that I can sort of critique the journalists on, if that makes sense. I'm sort of babbling, but if that makes sense.
No, reputation when
I didn't have that. Yeah, I had nobody. I had Shaun Pinner, the mercenary, captured in Ukraine. Nobody was there looking out for me. So now, I feel an obligation to look out for those guys that are Ukrainian soldiers. Why the media can't say Ukrainian soldier? Because mercenary sells clicks. It gets clicks. It's clickbait. So, essentially, I'm a Ukrainian soldier. I was a Ukrainian Marine, but, people don't want to write that.
It does have negative connotations as well. It strips the agency. It strips any idea that you're fighting for values from it. So you can see, why it's so damaging and why they'd want to do it. Well, the last sort of question here is going to be around. I still think so many people here, in Britain and Europe, think, well, this is something that's happening far away to people of which we, don't know all that much. There is that definite sort of sense of it, and yet, for you and I and those who are observing, Russian informational operations, it's quite clear that nothing could be further from the truth. They are keen on eroding our institutions. They're keen on eroding our political systems, dividing, conquering, causing chaos, because where they create those conditions, it makes it easier for them to get sanctions lifted. It makes it easier for them to inject their resources into our markets, to inject their narratives and even their people back into the media ecosystem. So What's your view here? How do we counter this? How do we get people to understand that Russia is everyone's problem and that we are technically, I would say, at war with them, certainly in a hybrid informational sense?
I can tell you what I've been doing. I've been quite direct now. I haven't literally skirted around the issue. You know, if Russia wins in Ukraine, that puts them closer to an Article 5, NATO Article 5. All those battlefield advancements you would have seen Ukraine make that everyone writes about would then be Russian. It would then pretty much forcibly mobilize every fighting age male in Ukraine to then turn on NATO. So there's your first. And also, he would move in ballistics closer to the UK. The flight times would be cut. Time to react would be reduced. He would pretty much control a lot of the, Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe. Russia would be controlling that.
And drone tech. So,
and drone
if you look
tech
at the
and
ranges,
everything else.
London's well in target if they were to get long-range Ukrainian drone tech.
Absolutely. You're 6 hours from the border to hit Germany by car. You think how quick a missile's going to get into Berlin. So yeah, I mean, it's a great country to invest in. Russia has really failed in every aspect of its SMO. When you go back to the original aims of Putin to invade Ukraine, he's not achieved any of those goals. He hasn't denazified it. NATO's got bigger. He's lost 1.3 million Russians crippled or killed for what? Under 2%, 1% of the country since 2022. I mean, it's bizarre he's still even in a job. So if there was a democracy, he would have lost his job at the end of 2023. It's like bizarre, and he's still going to keep pumping Russians into the meat grinder. And I don't see a breakthrough for Russia at all. In fact, we've clawed back over 400 square kilometers. We've now got fire control on the main routes into the main roads into Crimea. We've now got drones flying over Mariupol. The longer this war goes on, the more it seems that Putin is losing leverage in any sort of discussions. And you've got a peace envoy in Witkoff. They've never even been to Ukraine. So we've got to keep, explaining the truths of what's going on here. And that's how I've been doing it, with pictures, evidence, essays about what's actually happening here. And it started with the power shift that I wrote about. And sort of really that's when I got the confidence. I wrote a paper for SIPA talking about Pokrovsk because it was obvious that the West doesn't understand still Ukrainian tactics and how, if they withdraw from Pokrovsk, where do they withdraw to? If it's effectively killing many, many Russians, they're going to keep that open for as long as possible. And you have to trust the generals and the headshed are making the right decisions on that. It was clear a lot of people in the West didn't really understand how that was fought. And just by explaining that it was like the farmhouse at Waterloo, Hougoumont, then people really sort of got it, and that went viral. So it just sort of there's a place where an intermediary for people like you and me to be able to talk about what's happening on the ground in Ukraine and relay that to Western audiences who, no disrespect to mainstream media, they're coming in for 2 weeks and then they go. They have no idea about the climate, the culture, the community, what's happening. They come with an idea of a story. There's no depth in the stories.
Kind of stuff.
And even the BBC this week put a headline up talking about how, the British government, the FCO, isn't in dialogue with one of the British guy's lawyers, who turns out to be probably a Russian citizen. The FCO isn't going to talk to a Russian citizen, whether they're good or bad and their intentions, are good. The FCO isn't going to do that. It's not going to talk to a Russian-based lawyer firm, a Russian citizen, about a British, citizen. So, and that was missed out from the story. So, there's a lot of people commentating on the war that actually don't know anything about the country and never been even into Ukraine or East Ukraine, which you end up starting to fight that as well. The Julia Menendez, she is Ukrainian, but they're so far detached and for their own personal book and gain and want to sell books. They want to create that propaganda. They go on Tucker Carlson as a Russian platform. I mean, it's there's a lot of it going on at the moment, and that's deeply sad. And corruption isn't helping things here either. But at least we're actively, dealing with that. And this is the second most powerful man in Ukraine that's now in a dock. That is democracy working.
Hugely symbolic, absolutely, and
hugely symbolic.
Again, that story doesn't get around enough. It's like, oh, there's corruption in Ukraine. It's like Ukraine is fighting corruption in the midst of a war, which is, I think, unprecedented. If you look at British internal documents in the Second World War, we had the most enormous crime wave during the Blitz. I mean, we've laundered that quite nicely. But the incidents of people stealing from bombed out houses, the black market, and we had an off the scale kind of corruption in Britain. But this stuff gets laundered. Yeah, exactly. VD through the roof. There was almost a national health emergency of venereal disease. Because again, a lot of people don't know if they're going to live or die the next day, and moral frameworks change slightly in those situations. But to criticize Ukraine as if somehow there's this ideal version of what we did, and Ukraine isn't living up to it. I mean, that's just Western hubris and imperialism and absolute ignorance, actually. And I'm so glad that you're fighting it daily and finding these powerful angles and this powerful kind of format in which to do it. And if anyone watching this is not tuned into your Substack and your materials, for goodness sake, what are you doing? You have to tap into that, because you are one of the best sources of information and insight.
Yeah, I podcasted before you just said, describe yourself in one word. I said, probably I've been told I'm tenacious. I hate losing, even if it's with my nieces at Monopoly and things like that. I think tenacious would be a good word. I don't want to roll over and give up, and even because many of my friends never made out in Mariupol, so we've got to always remember that. I remember that every day in what I do. So thanks very much for the kind word.
Thank you. No, we need that, because Russian imperial mechanic and its aggression is relentless. It is relentless. It will not stop. And I think that's the bit that we need to hammer home in the West. All those who think that when the war in Ukraine is over, however it ends, that all of this unpleasantness will seem like a distant dream. Now, I'm afraid I got news for them. This is going to go on and on until the Russian imperial project is collapsed and gone.
I'll say one more thing quick. There's a lot of hope here for the special tribunal. Obviously, my court case, which you can find out on my YouTube, Substack, anywhere you find me, really. If we win this case, it will set precedent. Anybody who's been affected by Russian atrocities will then claim off the Russian state in a landmark case. So, and there's another 6 behind me. If I fail, there's another 6 or 7 behind me who are queuing up to jump in on this. So it's really important. So there's a lot of hope here that you can't have peace without justice. So the special tribunal, which for all intents and purposes is going to be set up along the lines of Nuremberg, it is something. It is something to the people here. It is something that if does go next year, will make life very difficult for the Russian elite to move around to countries. It will then tarnish them with more war crimes, individual war crimes for individual people that have made those decisions, and justice for people like me who've had our house stolen, and families that have had people killed for this genocidal invasion of Ukraine. So that's a big thing to look out for in the coming months to watch for. This special tribunal.
Great. Well, I look forward to hearing more on that. And of course, I wish you every success. Shaun, thanks for everything you're doing. Thanks for coming back on.
My pleasure.
Let's unpack the book, The Dark Heart of Russia, because it helps to explain how we got to this point. It's edited by me, Jonathan Fink, the creator and host of the Silicon Curtain podcast. It's published this month by Gibson Square in London and is already available for order and delivery online though officially the PR release will coincide with the Phantom Victory Day parade in Moscow on May the 9th. 30 interviews, 30 voices selected from over 1,000 interviews that have been conducted on this channel. And the lineup that we have put into this book reads like a who's who of the people Moscow would most like to silence. Bill Browder, Garry Kasparov, Fiona Hill, General David Petraeus, Peter Pomerantsev, Luke Harding, Mark Galeotti, Keir Giles, Anders Puck-Nielsen, Alexander Etkind, Yuri Felshtinsky, General Ben Hodges, and many, many more. And with a strong set of Ukrainian voices included, it could be no other way. Volodymyr Ermolenko, Alena Holoshka, Sasha Dozhik, Olga Takaryuk, and Alexander Romantsova, among several others. And the timing is not accidental. We are releasing this book precisely as the Kremlin's central myth, the myth of Russian victory, Russian strength, Russian inevitability, is being shredded in real time. Ukraine matters, and I think this book matters, and our support for Ukraine is the only way of stopping Russian imperialism from its eternal outward expansion and the destruction that it brings in its wake.